The business of banking. Peter goes into the banking business with $1 capital, and immediately issues bills to the amount of $1.25. Let us say that he issues 5 bills, each of which is to circulate for the amount of 25 cents. Lames comes to the bank with 4 of Peter's bills, and says, "Here are 4 of your new 25-cent notes which purport to be payable on demand, and I will thank you to give me a silver dollar for them." Peter redeems the bills and in so doing pays out his whole capital. Afterward comes John, with the 5th note, and makes a demand similar to that lately made by James. Peter answers, slowly and hesitatingly, "I regret, exceedingly, the force of present circumstances. But, I, just paid, out my whole capital, to James. I am, under, the painful necessity, of requesting you, to wait a little longer for your money." John at once becomes indignant and says, "Your bills state on their face that you will pay 25 cents upon each one of them whenever they are presented. I present one now. Give me the money, therefore, without more words, for my business is urgent this morning." Peter answers, "I shall be in a condition to redeem my bills by the day after tomorrow. But for the meanwhile, my regard for the interest of the public forces me unwillingly to suspend specie payments." "Suspend specie payments?" says John. "What other kind of payment, under heaven, could you suspend? You agree to pay specie. For specie is the only legal tender, and when you don't pay that, you don't pay anything. When you don't pay that, you break. Why don't you own up at once? But while I am about it, I will give you a piece of my mind. This extra note which you have issued beyond your capital is a vain phantom, a hollow humbug and a fraud. And as for your bank, you would better take in your sign. For you have broken." These be very bitter words, as said the hostess of the Boar's Head Tavern at Eastcheap. John is right. Peter's capital is all gone, and the note for 25 cents, which professes to represent specie in Peter's vaults, represent the tangibility of an empty vision, the shadow of a vacuum. But which bank is it that is broken? Is it the bank that does business on a specie capital, or the bank which does business on the notes of the debtors to the bank? Evidently it is the bank that does business on the specie capital that is broken. It is the specie-paying bank that has ceased to exist. John understands this very well, notwithstanding his violent language a moment since. He knows that his is the only bill which Peter has in circulation, and that Peter owes, consequently, only 25 cents. He knows also that the bank has owing to it $1.25. Peter owes 25 cents and has owing to him $1.25. John feels, therefore, perfectly safe. What is John's security? Is it the specie capital? Not at all. James has taken the whole of that he has for a security, the debts which are owing to the bank. Peter's bank begins now to be placed in sound, philosophical condition. At first he promised to pay $1.25 in specie, while he actually possessed only $1 with which to meet the demands that might be made upon him. How could he have made a more unreasonable promise, even if he had tried? Now that he has suspended specie payments, he has escaped from the unphilosophical situation in which he so rashly placed himself. Peter's bank is still in operation, it is by no means broken. His bills are good, guaranteed, and worthy of considerable confidence. Only his bank is now a simple and not a complex bank, being no longer two banks in one, for the specie-paying element has vanished in infinite darkness. Currency. And here we may notice that Peter has solved, after a rough manner indeed, one of the most difficult questions in political economy. His bill for 25 cents is currency, and yet it is not based upon specie, nor directly connected in any way with specie. We would request the reader to be patient with us and not make up his mind in regard to our statement until he has read to the end of the chapter. It shall not be very long. Light breaks on us here, which we would endeavor to impart to the reader. The security for the bill is legal value, the security and actual value having been carried away by James, that is, the security for the bill is the legal claim which the bank has upon the property of its debtors. We see, therefore, that legal value may be made a basis for the issue of notes to serve as currency. We see, therefore, the faint indication of a means whereby we may perhaps emancipate ourselves from the bondage of hard money, and the worse bondage of paper which pretends to be a representative of hard money. Let the reader not be alarmed. We abominate banks that suspend specie payment as much as he does. The run of our argument leads us through this desolate valley. But we shall soon emerge into the clear day. We may notice in considering a bank that has suspended specie payments, 1. The bank officers, who are servants of the stockholders. 2. The bills which are issued by the bank officers, and which circulate in the community as money. And 3. The notes of the debtors of the bank, binding these debtors, which notes, deposited in the safe, are security for the bills issued. Let us now take for illustration, a non-specie paying bank that shall be perfect alter its kind. That is a bank, whose capital shall be, in actual value, literally equal 0. Suppose there are 100 stockholders. Suppose $100,000 worth of bills to be in circulation and that $100,000 legal value is secured to the bank by notes given by the bank's debtors. These stockholders will be remarkable individuals, doing business after a very singular fashion. For example, the stockholders own stock in this bank. But as the whole joint stock equals 0, each stockholder evidently owns only the 100th part of nothing, a species of property that counts much or little, according to the skillfulness with which it is administered. The stockholders, through the agency of the bank officers, issue their paper, bearing no interest, exchanging it for other paper, furnished by those who receive the bills, bearing interest at the rate of 6% per annum. The paper received by the bank binds the debtor to the bank to pay interest, while the paper issued by the bank puts it under no obligation to pay any interest at all. Thus the stockholders doing business with no capital whatever, make 6% per annum on a pretended $100,000 of actual value which does not exist. Yet, meanwhile, these stockholders furnish the community with an available currency. This fact ought always to be borne in mind. Non-specie paying banks, of course, make dividends. During the suspension of 1837 and 1838, all the banks of Pennsylvania made dividends, although it was prohibited in the charters of most of them. After the suspension which took place in Philadelphia in October, 1839, most of the banks of that city resolved not to declare dividends until the pleasure of the legislature could be known. By an act authorizing the continuance of the suspension until the 15th of January, 1841, permission was granted to make dividends, contrary to every principle of justice and equity. We do not know why we speak especially of the Pennsylvania banks in this connection, as we have yet to hear of the first bank, either in Pennsylvania or in any other state, that has had the delicacy to suspend the declaration of dividends merely because it suspended specie payments.